Fellas, Alex Bromley said that pull-ups are C tier. Pull-ups are under attack. He said this in a tier list video recently, and I thought I'd give my thoughts on the prompt because it's a really fun prompt and I see the community is really fired up about it. I think he and I have a lot of common ground and then some differences of opinion that I think I'm gonna cover as well. Check out the video in the description right now and subscribe to Bromley if you're not already. But fellas, I wanna know before we get into everything, what do you think? Are pull-ups C tier? Why or why not? There's no right or wrong answer. I genuinely just wanna know what you think. I think before we get into anything else, we do have to talk a little bit of just credentials and different things that I've done with the pull-up and the barbell row, back exercises in general. So for reference, I'm about 200 pounds, pretty lean. I can do 30 pull-ups in one set at that weight. I can do weighted pull-ups with 3 plates for a bunch of reps. I can do 4-plate weighted pull-ups, 1-arm pull-ups, 1-arm chin-ups, reasonable form muscle-ups. I can do barbell rows for many reps. I also recently did 100 total weighted pull-ups with 45 pounds. I'm gonna put a full training log up showing the entire thing, or I might put it up as B-roll for this video, I don't know yet. Just for a fun workout. So just to preface everything, I think that the pull-up is one of my better back exercises, or else I wouldn't have done it so much. And likewise the same with the row, which Bromley also talked about and kind of compared the pull-up to in some ways. Good friend Alex Bromley, like I said, rated the pull-up C tier and rated a bunch of exercises that I never really would have thought of above the pull-up as being above the pull-up. The interesting thing is that this is simultaneously both the exact opposite of what you usually hear, because you have a lot of folks that will say pull-ups are like one of the best back exercises, which I think they are. But then when you hear people say the contrary, it's usually like, for lack of a better term, like a more dainty exercise like the iliac pull down. So there was a lot of pushback on that from myself included. And with Bromley though, a lot of the exercises that he ranked above it were like hardcore exercises that you could do in front of a strength enthusiast and they would clearly see that you're serious about lifting weights, especially if you're jacked. Overall though, man, I think something got lost in translation when he was making the video between himself and the viewer, which when you remove the rhetoric of everything, like the finer details of what he was saying, his overall opinion and argumentation was pretty straightforward. And I think for you to understand, if you even disagree or agree with someone in the first place, you need to know what they're saying. So I'm gonna just take a little bit of time to cover what was literally said on the video. First and foremost, to me, it was pretty clear that there was like a strongman / strength training bias in terms of not only the different exercises that were covered, but then the way that they were ranked in terms of hierarchy. And in general, just to preface or rather paint an umbrella over everything that he ranked in the video, a lot of the stuff was ranked in their capacity to be useful to people who aren't particularly strong or are developing strength, not for someone that can necessarily have a little bit of a base built in terms of their strength and size. So basically you're a ranked beginner. I think the biases are to be expected. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I can say for one that a lot of the stuff that he covered in the video is stuff that I wouldn't have thought to have done for like a hypertrophy program. And that's what you get when you watch content that is outside of what you usually are into. So a lot of the stuff like the not even just the farmer's walks, but the yoke carry, some of the weird strongman stuff, you would never have encountered that if you just watch hypertrophy bodybuilding content, basically. The C tier rating on pull-ups just got a lot of people pissed for some reason. I think we just need to break it down Barney style, and in the very video that he ranked as C tier, he also prefaced everything by saying that C tier exercise is still good. It might just have more limited use cases, or it might be for more of an isolated stimulus to one particular part of the back, in this case, the pull-up. And he also said, and he left room for if you have more of a desire to work an isolated part of your back, then you would obviously value that exercise a little bit more, which is just common sense to me, because if you need something more than the other person, you're gonna value it more. So it leaves wiggle room for it to potentially be like a B or A tier exercise if you're looking to get wider lats. Part of what contributed to the C tier rating though was the stability issue with pull-ups, like the back and forth motion that you can get on pull-ups, especially when you get particularly fatigued. I don't see that as being a big issue. It's really simple fix. One way you can fix it is by just putting your feet a little bit in front of your body and bracing your core. That'll target your lats a little bit more. But you can also do like a gangsta lean and then brace your core and do the same thing, and that'll allow you to have the straight up and down stability. And also just not dive bombing into the bottom of the rack. That will really, really help with you moving back and forth on the exercise. I don't particularly think that it's a big like detractor from doing pull-ups, no more than it is like the stability bracing demands that you have on a standing barbell row. And we'll get into more of the comparisons between the two of those because they were compared to one another a few times throughout the video. One thing that he said that was pretty interesting that I think you can't disagree with even if you like one over the other is that there's no real reason or distinction to do a pull-up over a pull-down because they do a lot of the same things. And to me, like I said, there's no logical reason to disagree with that. If you can't do pull-ups or you don't like them, pull-downs are very, very similar, and you can just do the pull-downs instead. And it is a fact that when you look at most bodybuilders, not even just the really mutant enhanced ones, you can look at natural bodybuilders that compete in reputable federations that a lot of the times you'll see they'll be the onesie twosies that do pull-ups, but a lot of them do pull-downs and machine rows and things of that nature. I'll give you a strength training example. I remember reading on Instagram once from Matthew's Lat, really high-level street lifting competitor. I couldn't even quote you his max pull-up, man. It's something stupid, but something that he said was when it came to filling up the volume of his training, a lot of that volume came from doing lat pull-downs because, and this is what he said, for him, it helps him better target specific areas of his back because of the way that you can move your torso back and forth. It's a little bit easier to do that for him on a pull down than it is on a pull up. And also it's just a little bit of a break from doing the tons of volume of pull-ups that he does. So it just fills in the volume with the pull downs. So that's your strength training example to show you that both have their use cases and it's not just like, oh, pull downs are bad. So overall, I think I agree there, but I don't think that that necessarily is a detractor from the lift insofar as it's just something that says that both lifts are great. So I don't think that that really contributes to the C tier in my opinion. A big point in the video also was that rows have better carryover to other lifts than pull-ups do, and by extension, like weighted pull-ups. And to be honest with you, I think that you could do a lot of pull-ups and be decent at rows and do a lot of rows and be decent at pull-ups. The two will have carryover to one another in that regard. But when it comes to like a row carrying over to a deadlift, I can't think of, between the people that I coach, myself, or even looking at the training of high-level strength competitors, you're not gonna do a barbell row specifically to have carryover to like a deadlift or a pull or a squat or anything of that nature. You would do the row to generally get your upper back bigger, which would help in stability and strength at some point of the range of motion. But adding 50 pounds to your barbell row is not gonna add a proportional amount of weight to your deadlift or your squat. It just doesn't work like that. And in that regard, the pull-up honestly is pretty similar in that case. It's more so about like, you know, what joint angles are you working a lot of already? And if you're doing a lot in the horizontal plane, you may want to work in some overhead work. So pull downs in other words, and vice versa. If you're doing a lot of pull downs, you may want to do some horizontal work. And that's more from just like a movement economy standpoint, more from a just don't overuse the same thing before it snaps you up basically standpoint. Now, when it comes to movements that require more general strength across your whole body, like a lot of the strongman stuff that he talked about, obviously a barbell row is going to recruit your posterior chain the other day. I did 80 total reps of deficit barbell rows actually yesterday with my body weight, just for fun. I've been on a big mass reps kick lately, and hey, I can tell you what, my posterior chain is cooked from all the volume that I did on that. So I do think that it would have better carryover to those more general lifts, but like from a big barbell lift comparison, they're both really trash. So I don't really think that's where the C tier ranking would come into play. There are two things that I think were pretty substantive in terms of big major cons of the actual lift that I want to give to and give my thoughts on. There was a point about form breakdown wherein he mentioned the rounding of the shoulders when you get fatigued on pull-ups can pull away from the specific stimulus that you're trying to give to certain parts of your back. And I do see that, but again, I feel like the little bit of breakdown that you see on most pull-ups and pull-downs on average is not as much as you even see on the very first rep of most rows. And I left this comment on, I think on the video itself and on a follow-up reel where he kind of was just reiterating some points that he made on the original video. And I think that if I'm being honest, I don't know if he shares this opinion or if he didn't think about it this way, but y'all let me know what you think. I feel like most of the time when I see people who are able to do pull-ups, when they do pull-ups, the form is at least decent, right? You may see a little bit of kipping here, maybe the range of motion is a little bit different from person to person, but the form overall, they're still working their back really well, whether they're doing them good or great or just average. You know, you do an okay enough pull-up. But I'm gonna be honest with you, most of the time when I see people doing barbell rows, if they're not doing them super light, the form is just shit. And I'm not talking about a little bit of controlled and deliberate movement of your torso. So like for instance, something that I advocated for a lot last year with barbell rows is that you pull up from the floor with your back and your arms and you raise the torso a little bit at the top to allow the lockout to be more smooth, but you're not using the momentum. You're just changing the joint angle. That's it. You're not yanking the bar. It's still the back and the arms working, and the posterior chain is under tension the entire time. I can't tell you how many people that when they would tag me in rows, and this isn't a knock on anybody, it's a more advanced, deliberate technique, which we'll recover in a second because he said this in his video. It's something that takes a long time to learn. But the average rows with heavy weight just don't look good because they take time to learn and they take a level of maturity to just say that, like, look, the appropriate load for me, I want it to be 275, but it really should be 200 pounds. Does that make sense? Whereas on pull-ups, I don't necessarily see the same thing. In short, in my opinion, the average set of pull-ups looks way, way better and is much easier to do well and is done much more effectively in the average lifter than it is with barbell rows. Any kind of barbell rows, it isn't like a machine row. Now, barbell rows are an excellent exercise, and Bromley said so himself. He said in this video, it's either an S tier exercise if you do it really well, or it's D tier if you do it like green baby poop. And for a lot of people, it's gonna take years to learn how to do that, he said. And I agree, it's gonna take you years of knowing what a good barbell row feels like and then loading that movement pattern and practicing that over time for you to really be able to do it well. And it is at least an A tier exercise, at least an A tier, if not an S. And like I said, it's a really good exercise, but therein is the problem. If it takes years to learn how to do well, that accessibility issue that was stated with the pull-up by what he said also applies to the row as well. You see what I'm saying? That's my only point of contention, and that's the only like piece of like food for thought I've ever offered on the video for the major part of it. So what are my overall thoughts? For one, I think that overall we agree on 80% of things. There's just one small thing and one larger thing that we disagree on. So like I said, about 80% of the overall opinions we agree on, and that's going to be most of the time, unless someone is just blatantly saying something that's incorrect, or if they're just saying something to piss somebody off. Just because you might not like someone's opinion on something doesn't mean that it's blatantly incorrect or that they're trying to rage bait you. I just saw a man with his own set of experiences and biases, and one or two things, one small thing and one larger thing that I would just offer food for thought on. But overall, I mean, nothing he said really aggravated me or made me upset for the most part. A big talking point that he made actually is that the pull-up is limited in utility for a lot of people because a lot of people can't do many pull-ups, and you need to do a good volume of something for it to be an exercise that even does anything for building muscle or strength on you. Now, it is true that rows will work thickness better just because time-tested experience will tell you that. If you look and see the biggest backs and thickest backs of all time, the row is the weapon of choice for that. But the pull-up, and honestly the pull-down could even be an even better option than the pull-up. They can work those other physical qualities as well, and they can work them damn well. It's just different use cases, like I said. It's about how you fit everything holistically in a program. If I was to rank the 3 exercises between pull downs, pull-ups, and rows, and accessibility to newer beginners, which was a big framework of the entire video Bromley made, I'd say that pull downs are the most accessible. Then you got pull-ups, because once you get good at pull downs, you're gonna be able to do some pull-ups, provided that you lose some weight if you need to lose some weight, and that you're overall just a reasonable body weight. And then lastly would be rows, not because a monkey could walk up to a bar and freaking yank on it, but to do them well and skillfully takes more time than it takes to do either of those two well. Something that I see with rows, now that I'm talking about it, with we'll say even an intermediate lifter, for instance, because we like to talk about, oh, well, it doesn't count if a new lifter does it. I've seen decently strong, decently big intermediate lifters, when they want to do a heavy barbell row, they'll deadlift the bar past their shins, then stand up almost all the way, and then shrug it back like that and bend the arms a little bit and call it a row. Sometimes even call it a strict row. And that's just not how you want to do it if you're looking to work your back really well. Unless you load up like ungodly amounts of weight, bro. I'm not saying don't do rows. I put rows in the S tier. I'm just saying you have to pay more attention to what you're doing, which is not a detractor on the movement, but if we're talking about within the logic of the tier list, if you're ranking pull-ups and demeriting them because of the form thing, you gotta take 10 times more away from the rows, just in actuality. Where there is one Alex Bromley, I've seen him do some impressive rows with really good form. Where there's one Alex Bromley, there's 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 lifters that are just not doing the row effectively. One of the last big things that I want to talk about is the body weight factor. Obviously, if you're on the heavier side, you're not really gonna be able to do a lot of pull-ups if you're starting off. But where I think that that's a good talking point for like your new. Sorry fellas, my freaking camera just ran out of storage. It's probably a sign that I need to wrap this yap fest up. But in conclusion, I think that the body weight part is it's something that you need to consider. Obviously, if you can't do a lot of pull-ups, you gotta build it back with something else. Very last thing I'll mention in the video about how I like to do that. But for folks that are just bulking at a normal body weight, that like to say, oh, well, I'm bulking and that's the reason why I can't do 20 pull-ups. I got a little bit of tough love. I'm gonna just be real with you, man. If you're like 160, 180, 200 pounds, the amount of weight that you should be gaining on a good eating to support your diet, reasonable body composition, bulk, it is not gonna be so quick and so substantial that you should not be gaining absolute gains in your total weight lifted. That's body weight plus weight added, on top of just adding more absolute weight as well. So for example, if you start off your bulk at, you can do 45-pound weighted pull-ups and you're 160 pounds. You get to 170 pounds, you should be doing 55-pound weighted pull-ups, because the truth of the matter is that little bit of weight that you're gaining is over such a large period of time. If you're doing everything that you should be doing in terms of your eating, your sleeping, your diet, and training properly, most importantly, that you're training properly, you should be getting all of those things and more. And at the very worst case scenario, if the weight you're adding to your pull-ups is going down, your absolute strength should be going up. Meaning, if you start your bulk at 160 pounds, adding 45 pounds, and you get up to like 180, you should be doing weighted pull-ups with like 35, 40 pounds. You see how it's still big, the absolute number is still bigger even though you're adding a little bit less weight. So I just think that talking point is more of like a gut check that, man, you really should evaluate what you're doing for your back training. In conclusion, Bromley did not say pull-ups are a bad exercise. He said that he likes rows more and other exercises more as a result of his background with strongman. It's just evident in watching the video. And he has some limitations that he pointed out with the pull-up. Some I agree with. There were a couple others that I have some thoughts on that I talked about in the video, but overall pull-ups are a great exercise. Nobody is going to tell you not to do them if they know what they're talking about. Now, if you want to do more pull-ups and you're either too heavy or not strong enough to do very many of them, I made a video a couple years ago, I think, it was a long time ago, called How to Do Pull-Ups, the Final Answer. I might link to it in the description. If I don't, it's going to be on the screen somewhere. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Now, after listening to everything, do you think pull-ups are a C tier exercise? Let me know. Have a good one.